Welcome. It's time for Sacrosexual Living Part 2. Today we'll go for Part 2, which is the Law of Reverse Effect. If you'd like to hear Part 1, it is here on my YouTube channel. You're free to go and listen to that first. But let's dive in. Let's look at Romans chapter 7. Start off there. Starting with verse 7 says, "What shall we say then? Is the law sin? May it never be. On the contrary, I would not have come to know sin except through the law. For I would not have known about coveting if the law had not said, 'You shall not covet.' But sin, taking opportunity through the commandment, produced in me coveting of every kind. For apart from the law, sin is dead. I was once alive apart from the law, but when the commandment came, sin became alive, and I died. And this commandment, which was to result in life, proved to result in death for me. For sin, taking an opportunity through the commandment, deceived me, and through it, killed me." Unquote. Has this passage ever struck you as odd? You ever wondered what Paul was talking about here? It took me a while to really comprehend what Paul was sharing here, but recently I've been able to begin to scratch the surface of what it means for us today. So I want to share that with you in hopes that you will also find it to be beneficial regarding the struggle many, or not most, have with what is known as sins of lust. Man is ceaselessly endeavoring to create new life. We've named this tendency sex. We've called it passion or lust. But what's the meaning of this lust? The basic urge to create, to produce new life. So I don't even like to call it lust. Life itself does not want to end. But what is it all for? We have deliberately condemned the urge to procreate for thousands of years. Instead of accepting it, we've abused it. We've relegated it to the lowest possible place. We've concealed it and pretended it's not there, as if there were no place for it in life, no room for it in the scheme of things. The truth is that there's nothing more vital than this urge, and it should be given its rightful place. Man has not freed himself from it by covering it up and by trampling it. On the contrary, he has entangled himself in it even more. This repression has yielded the opposite result from the one expected. Like Paul said in the passage at the beginning, our focus on its condemnation has led us to focus on it to the point where we end up walking towards it instead of away from it. We collide with the very thing which we're trying to save ourselves from, because the object of our fears becomes the center of our focus. In the same way, man has been trying to save himself from sex for the last 5,000 or 6,000 years, and the result is that everywhere, in every nook and cranny, he's confronted by sex in all its various forms. Have you ever observed that the mind is pulled towards and hypnotized by the very thing it is trying to avoid? People who taught man to be against sex are fully responsible for making him so aware of sex. The over-sexuality that exists in man can be blamed on perverted teachers. Today we are afraid to discuss sex. Why are we so mortally afraid of this subject? It is because of a presupposition that man may become sexual just by talking about sex. And this view is totally wrong. There is, after all, a vast difference between sex and sexuality. Our society will only be free of the ghost of sex when we develop the courage to talk about sex in a rational and healthy manner. It's only by understanding it in all of its aspects that we'll be able to transcend sexuality. You cannot free yourself from a problem by shutting your eyes to it. Only a madman thinks his enemy will vanish if he closes his eyes. The ostrich in the desert thinks in this way. The ostrich thrusts its head in the sand, and since he cannot see his enemy, he thinks his enemy is not there. This kind of logic is pardonable in the case of the ostrich, but in man it is unforgivable. Shutting one's eyes is a sign of weakness, and the whole of humanity is guilty of it. Not only has man blatantly shut his eyes to sex, he has also entered into innumerable inner conflicts with it. The devastating results of this war with sex are too well known to be enumerated here. The major cause of fear, of doubt, of anxiety, of the stress and strain on contemporary man is the pressure of passion. Man has turned his back on an inherent and powerful urge. Without attempting to understand sex, we have shut our eyes to it out of fear, and the results have been catastrophic indeed. Man-made, death-oriented religious teaching has made man sex-minded, and it has perverted him from another angle as well. It shows him the golden pinnacle of chastity, but gives him no guidance in getting a foothold on the first rung in understanding the base, in understanding sex. First of all, we have to recognize sex and understand it. We have to comprehend this elemental urge. Only then can we strive to transcend it, to sublimate it so we can reach the stage of chastity. Without understanding this basic life force in all its forms and facets, all man's efforts to restrain and suppress it will only help him degenerate into a sick and incoherent lunatic. But we do not concentrate on the basic illness. We spout the high ideal of chastity. Man has never been so sick, so neurotic, so wretched, or so unhappy. Man is completely perverted. He's poisoned at the root. This is the fatal flaw in what is passed off on our youth as purity teaching. It is the repression of sex that makes you so conscious of the difference between a man and a woman. You're able to forget the name, face, or nationality of someone. If I'd met you, I might forget your name, your face, your age, your status, everything about you. But you never forget the sex of a person. You never forget whether someone was male or female. Have you ever had any doubt that the person you had a conversation with, let's say on a flight somewhere last year, was a man? Why? When you forget everything else about a person, why can't you erase that aspect from your memory? It's because the awareness of sex is so firmly rooted in man's mind, in his thought processes. Sex is ever present, ever active. Neither our society nor our planet can ever be healthy so long as this iron curtain, this distance, exists between men and women. Man cannot be at peace with himself so long as this burning fire rages inside him, so long as he sits tightly on it. He has to strive to suppress it every moment of every day. The fire is burning us, it is scorching us, but even so, we're not prepared to face it, not prepared to look into it. What is this fire? It's not an enemy, it's a friend. What is the nature of this fire? I want to tell you that once you know this fire, it will no longer be an enemy. It will become a friend. If you understand this fire, it will not burn you. It will warm your houses. It will cook for you, and will also become your lifelong friend. Electricity's flashed in the sky for thousands of years. Sometimes it even killed people, but nobody ever thought that this very same energy would someday run our fans and light our homes. Nobody could imagine these possibilities then. But today this electricity has become our friend. How? Had we shut our eyes to it, we would never have fathomed its secrets. We would never have utilized it. It would have remained our enemy. It would always have been an object of fear. But man assumed a friendly attitude towards electricity. He took it upon himself to understand it, to know it, and slowly, a lasting friendship developed. Had that not happened, we would hardly be able to manage today. The sex inside man, his libido, is even more vital than electricity. A minute atom of matter annihilated an entire 100,000 people in the city of Hiroshima. But an atom of man's energy can create new life, a new person. Sex is more powerful than an atom bomb. Have you ever thought about the infinite possibilities of this force, about how we can transform it to better mankind? An embryo can become a life that blesses the whole world. An infinitely small atom of sexual energy has a towering person like the Apostle Paul manifest in it. But we're not inclined to even try to understand sex. We have to summon immense courage even to talk about it in public. What kind of fear is this that plagues us, so that we're not prepared to understand the force out of which the whole world is born? What is this fear? Why does sex alarm us so? To reach somewhere, one has to know the starting point. We have to start from where we are. It is imperative that we know this place first. And this is more important at the moment than the place we want to reach. In this context, sex is the fact, the reality. Sex is the starting point. But God God in heaven is far from here, and we can reach the truth of God only by understanding the starting point of the journey. Otherwise, we can't move an inch. We will be lost. We will be on a merry-go-round, moving but going nowhere. We've neither wanted nor tried to understand this problem. We've never delved into the reason there is such a great attraction to sex. I mean, who teaches you sex? The whole world is against its being taught. Parents feel children should not be allowed to know about it, and Christian teachers seem to all agree. But in adolescence, a young man finds out for himself that his whole being is filled with an anxiousness about sex. Then the age-old precautions fall, and sex wins. How does this happen? Truth and love are preached, but the things don't hold up. They prove vulnerable. Sex is firmly rooted in the core of our beings, but where is it anchored? Where is the center of this natural pull, of this pull that is so powerful and so profound? There lies the mystery. It is necessary to recognize the mystery first. Only then can we surpass it. Fundamentally, what we need to feel is the attraction for sex is not the attraction for sex at all. It's a pull towards experiencing spiritual ecstasy on a higher plane. And this experience has profound religious dimensions. There, man reaches beyond himself. There, he transcends himself. Two things happen to him in those depths. First, in copulation, the ego vanishes. Egolessness is created. For an instant, there is no I. For an instant, one does not remember oneself. In the sexual act, the ego fades away. Orgasm is a state of self-effacement. The second thing about the experience of sex is that time is undone just for an instant. Timelessness is created. As Jesus Christ has said of heaven, there shall be time no longer. In orgasm, the sense of time is non-existent. There's no past, no future. There's only the present moment. The present is not a part of time. The present is eternity. This is the second reason man is so eager for sex. The craving is not for the body of a woman by a man or vice versa. The passion is for something else, for something selfless, for the eternal. Lightning strikes in the darkness of the night, but the darkness is not part of the lightning. The only relation between the two is that lightning only stands out at night, only in the darkness. And the same is true of sex. There is a realization, an exhilaration, a light that shines in sex, but the phenomenon is not from sex itself. Although it's associated with it, it's just a byproduct. The light that shines in orgasm transcends sex. It comes from beyond. If we can comprehend this experience of the beyond, we can rise above sex. Otherwise, we'll never be able to. Those who oppose sex blindly will never be able to appreciate the phenomenon in its proper perspective. They will never be able to analyze the cause of this insatiable desire for sex, of this deep craving for sex. What I wish to emphasize is that this strong and recurring pull towards sex is for the momentary, transient realization of the heavenly. When we oppose sex as vehemently as we do, sex becomes the center of our consciousness. We cannot free ourselves from it. We become chained to it. The law of reverse effect comes into play, and we become bound to it. We try to run away from sex, but the more we try to rid ourselves of it, the more we become entangled to it. Man has started a war against sex, and the results of this war with sex are difficult to assess correctly. Prostitution only exists in direct proportion to a society's civilization. Did you ever reflect on how the institution of prostitution came into being in the first place? Can you find a prostitute in the hilly areas of the tribal peoples of the Amazon or in far-flung settlements? Impossible. These people can't even imagine there are women who sell their virtue, who undergo intercourse for money. But this trafficking in sex has developed with the advance of man's civilization. And we would be still more astonished were we to take fully into account all the other perversions of sex, were we to examine the full range of all of its ugly manifestations. What's happened to man? Who's responsible for this ugliness and debauchery? Those who have taught man to suppress or repress sex instead of understanding it are responsible. Because of this suppression, man's sex energy is leaking from the wrong pores. Man's whole society is sick and wretched. And if this cancerous society is to be changed, it is essential to accept that the energy of sex is divine, that the attraction for sex is essentially religious. But in the name of religion, we have destroyed any possibility of understanding sex. We've declared war on sex, on our basic instinct itself. The standard rule is not to see sex at all, but to shut your eyes and blindly barge into the temple of God. But can anyone reach anywhere with his eyes closed? Even if you reach inside, you will not be able to see God with closed eyes. Instead, you will only see the thing from which you've been running. The pundits we consider the enemies of sex are not its enemies at all, but its propagandists. They have created a glamour around sex. Their vehement opposition has created a mad attraction for sex. Bertrand Russell has written that in the Victorian era, when he was a child, ladies' legs were never seen in public. The clothes they wore swept the ground, covering their feet completely. If by chance even a woman's toe were visible, a man would immediately ogle it. It would arouse his passion. Russell further writes that today's women move about nearly half naked with their legs fully visible, but notes that it doesn't affect us nearly as much. This proves, he writes, that the more we conceal a thing, the more it arouses our curiosity. As Paul said at the beginning, but sin, taking opportunity through the commandment, produced in me coveting of every kind. The first step to free the world from sexuality is to allow families to remain nude as much as possible in the home. As far as it is feasible, it is advisable to allow children, both boys and girls, to play in the nude so that they become totally acquainted with each other's bodies. Then, tomorrow, there will be no necessity for them to hang on to each other in the streets. Then there will be no need to print nude pictures in books or in websites. Then they will be so familiar with each other's body that no kind of perverted attraction will be possible in the future. But the way of the world is just the opposite. The people who have covered and concealed the body have unwittingly created so great an attraction for it. Although it has overtaken our minds, we still haven't felt the full impact. Entire families and churches should remain nude and should play and worship in the nude for a long time, so no need of madness remains to plague them the rest of their lives. But the disease is already there, and it is on the increase. The existence of the disease can be observed in the bulk of obscene literature now being published. People read it, hiding it on their devices. We shout that obscene books should be banned, but we never pause to think where the men who read them are coming from. We protest the displaying of nude pictures, but never stop to ask why they are exhibited in the first place. All our efforts to date have borne wrong results because we have not befriended sex, but have declared war on it. We view suppression and lack of understanding as ways of dealing with sex problems. The deeper a man's understanding, the higher he can rise above sex. The less his understanding, the greater his attempts to suppress sex will be, and the results of repression are never fruitful, never pleasing, never healthy. Sex is man's most vibrant energy, but it should not be an end unto itself. Sex should lead man to his soul uniting with the eternal. The goal is from lust to light. It is quite possible the understanding of sex may lead you to the temple of your soul, and that is my desire.